According to Soren's judgment, the wind and thunder fiend suppression, true scripture he cultivated, had 4 stages, which happened to correspond with cultivation of the initial round. 3 acupoints was entry level, i.e., the early stage of the initial realm. His own 5 acupoints meant he was at the middle stage of the initial realm, nearly twice that of the Yellowhides, fighting the weak with strength. Yet it was still so strenuous. The reason was that he lacked the fiend arts the opponent could use. Faced with their formidable defense, he was momentarily at a loss and could only rely on brute force and cultivation to overpower them. Soren sighed. Cultivation was certainly important, but it would be best to have 2 or 3 trump card techniques. The 3 martial arts handed down from the Demon Suppression Division were already somewhat lacking against true great fiends. He turned around. The villagers had already prepared 2 wooden carts. The corpses were too numerous and heavy, so they simply took only the heads. But even so, they piled into a small mountain.
What is this for? Jace was somewhat bewildered.
Return to the city. Soren walked toward the old donkey that trotted leisurely from the intersection, swung himself up, and mounted it. After this experience, he had fully awakened. Gaining a good reputation to join the Demon Suppression Division was not as simple as he had thought. The Magistracy would not stand by and watch him ruin their plans. In that case, he had to sever ties. Dusk fell hazily over Cypress Cloud County. A street vendor was busily packing up, while a group of soldiers yawned repeatedly as they guarded the city gate. As a foul stench struck, the soldiers hurriedly covered their noses and mouths. The vendor straightened up and looked curiously toward the city gate. The next moment, a pile of terrifying wolf heads came into view, each face ferocious and unnervingly lifelike, bloody maws gaping wide, their brows still seeming to carry intense terror.
Monsters! Monsters have entered the city!
The vendor dropped his spoon, stumbled backward in panic, and fell flat on his face. The soldiers tensed up instantly, hurriedly grasping their spears. The 2 villagers pulling the carts, originally hunched over with curiosity and awkwardness from not having entered the city for so long, couldn't help but straighten their backs upon seeing the disgraceful reactions of these people.
What is with that look? We're scared stiff when we meet monsters. Can't even walk. But we're not afraid of a pile of dead bodies. They're tasty to eat.
Jace walked slowly into the city, his expression complex. Behind him, an old donkey leisurely chewed fodder, and the handsome young man riding it had a calm gaze. But the bloody stench radiating from him made everyone tremble.
Shen, is that Soren?
The soldiers hefted their long spears. The soldiers blinked in disbelief. His face was all too familiar to them. But now, aside from the unchanging features, both his expression and aura were worlds apart from the scoundrel he once was.
That damned menace.
It's still scaring me.
The vendor also got up from the ground in shame and anger, dusted off his clothes, and stole a glance at the young man on the donkey, feeling inexplicably awestruck. How many fiends must he have killed to dye his clothes like that?
Lord Soren, please, come this way.
He quickly made way, secretly delighted to have new gossip for mealtime. How long had it been since Cypress Cloud County last ventured out to slay demons, and on such a grand scale?
Well, you've thoroughly offended the Magistracy this time.
Jace took in everyone's expressions, and couldn't help but smile wryly. He didn't quite understand why Lord Soren, known for his diplomacy, would suddenly commit such a rash act. Soren lowered his eyes calmly and said slowly, "Did I have a choice?"
You have the power to slay fiends, but there was no need to make it known to all. With these skills, a bright future awaits you.
Mid-sentence, Jace suddenly froze. He remembered that the Demon Suppression Division's inspection was imminent. If one could present Cypress Cloud County as peaceful and tranquil, of course one's future would be secure. But he had already offended the fiends. In a pinch, who could guarantee the Magistracy wouldn't throw him to the wolves? If the AP fiends and Yellowhides came together to demand his life, it would be the same as trusting his fate to those dog officials. Rather than this, it would be better to make a big show and let the whole county know what kind of man Soren is. Under the scrutiny of the Demon Suppression Division's captain, who would dare claim they can silence the mouths of over 100,000 common folk. This wasn't rashness at all. It was clearly the result of careful deliberation.
After following you for 2 days, I feel like I am finally growing a brain.
Jace shook his head helplessly, then lifted his head and puffed out his chest, adopting a lofty posture. Seeing a group of bailiffs stumbling out of a tavern, he deliberately led the 2 laborers closer and smacked one with the flat of his saber sheath. Get lost. Want a taste of the whip? Arian had never suffered such humiliation. Drunk. He turned to retaliate. Damn it, which blind bastard? His eyes swept over Jace, and as he prepared to draw his saber, he caught a cold stare staring down at him from above. The guts he had to save face in front of his brothers instantly evaporated when he saw the 2 cartloads of dog demon heads, especially the yellow hide skull stacked at the very top. Arian touched his slapped face and retreated trembling. No matter how hard he thought, he couldn't understand how the other had returned alive. He had to go report to Magistrate Vale immediately. All right, take them to the Magistracy. After you are done, find them a place to stay and a good meal. As they left the street, Soren rummaged through his belt and tossed out a small piece of silver. You 2 have worked hard. This meal's on me.
You are too kind, sir.
The 2 laborers had seen with their own eyes how viciously he slaughtered fiends, and hadn't expected him to be so mild-mannered. They quickly nodded and thanked him. Only Jace frowned, holding the piece of silver, finding it strangely familiar. After bidding them farewell, Soren dismounted from the donkey, stretched slightly, concealing the weariness in his eyes, and walked unhurriedly toward his home. It had to be said, this was the most exhausting battle he'd ever fought. Not just physically, but the celestial chi in his acupoints had run completely dry, making him feel as if he'd plummeted from an immortal court to the mortal world in an instant. The immense sense of descent left his spirit somewhat listless. He stopped under the thatched eaves to avoid seeing anything he shouldn't. Soren reached out and knocked on the door. Before anyone appeared, a voice rang out. What took you so long? My stomach's about to shrivel up. Though the voice was listless, it remained clear and melodious. Hearing the response, Soren pushed the door open and entered, his brows furrowing slightly. He saw that the little house, which had been incredibly dirty and messy just yesterday, was now spotless, making him almost reluctant to step inside. Leora's damp hair cascaded down her back. Her freshly washed face was pretty and charming, and the hint of valiant spirit between her brows added a unique allure. She wore a black robe, which, though slightly oversized, somehow accentuated her tall figure. Her thick pants were half wet, outlining her long, shapely legs, and her fair bare feet were planted directly on the ground.
I washed all the clothes, including yours. I am borrowing your old ones for now.
Leora said, suddenly looking up. Did you go on duty? Or did you bathe in a pool of blood? She gave a slight sniff. Her expression shifted slightly. Fiend blood! Soren didn't reply, just averted his gaze, pulled a lotus leaf bundle from his chest, and tossed it onto the table. Make do with this. Seeing he didn't want to talk, Leora sensibly didn't press further. She sat at the table and eagerly unwrapped the lotus leaf stained with fiend blood. Hey, it is meat! She picked up a strip of bloody salted pork, wiped it a little, and stuffed it into a cold, hard-baked bun. Nom. I said make do. You could at least pick the clean parts. Even Soren couldn't help but rub his temples at this.
Only someone like you who has never tasted hardship would be so fussy. In the wilderness, no one cares if you starve to death.
Leora chewed the bread with an expression of pure enjoyment, and didn't forget to critique. So fragrant. Soren was speechless. The way she talked, it sounded like he had grown up in a wealthy merchant family, while she had grown up on the streets. How long do you plan to stay? Watching her eat so happily, Soren inexplicably felt a bit hungry himself. He reached for the fried cake, but her fair jade-like fingers lightly swatted his hand away. Leora picked up a clean flatbread and handed it over.
I set up a small shed in the backyard. Try not to disturb you. As for how long? Maybe another month. She wasn't very sure.
Soren took the flatbread, his expression unreadable. This woman never told the truth. Her background seemed innocent. but in reality, she had been sent away by the Forest family years ago. When she returned, who knows what skills she had learned, daring to go out of the city alone to subjugate demons. He had originally thought she was just a rash novice, but after spending time together, Soren found her to be meticulous, and her demeanor suggested she had endured hardship. She was nothing like those foolish, arrogant types. Most importantly, she had provoked that incredibly mysterious Fox clan and still managed to come back alive. The body's previous owner had locked her in the house, seemingly getting a bargain. But in Soren's eyes, this was simply courting death. Not to mention, once this was exposed, how could an ordinary constable deal with the wrath of the Forest family? Why wouldn't the Fox clan kill her? Soren couldn't figure it out, so he simply stopped thinking about it. Calmly, he said. Number. Hearing this, Leora wasn't surprised. Instead, she chuckled lightly.
What? Weren't you always wanting me to be your wife? Having second thoughts?
When he had captured her, the lecherous look on his face had been entirely genuine. She had thought that hearing her somewhat relent, Soren, no matter how composed he pretended to be, would at least show a hint of reaction. However, the young man merely lifted his gaze. After a moment, a trace of mockery flickered in his clear, sharp eyes. Leora slowly stopped chewing. Her index finger wiped a crumb from the corner of her mouth. She looked back at him, and the pitiful charm on her pretty face gradually faded under Soren's slightly mocking gaze. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, sighed helplessly, and in that instant, her entire demeanor subtly shifted. Leora straightened her posture, a sharp glint entering her narrow eyes.
Although I don't know why a mere constable, especially one who works for the fiends, would suddenly provoke them. She glanced sidelong at the blood-stained clothes on the young man. It doesn't feel good to pretend to be calm, does it? Desperately wanting to know a way to transcend.
Leora directly pointed out the fact that he had perfected his mortal body. She crossed her legs and unhurriedly smoothed down her clothes. A cold light surfaced in Leora's eyes.
Call me master, and I'll help you cross the threshold into the martial apprentice realm. What do you say?
She had been too hasty before, making up a crude martial arts name. Today she came well prepared. There was no way she couldn't fool a youngster like him. What a joke. Leora was full of confidence. She quietly looked at Soren. Then, she saw Soren gently raise his hand, remove the saber from his waist, and casually place it on the table. Soren's voice gradually turned indifferent. You left home to study. Did you learn how to put on a grand opera? He pressed his 5 fingers against the scabbard. Leora suddenly felt enveloped by a dense, murderous aura. She swallowed involuntarily. You? What are you going to do? Soren shook his head. I am not interested in you. But I am very interested in your sect.
I already told you. I don't have a sect.
Leora was about to explain further, but Soren took out a small cloth bundle from his chest, placed it beside the scabbard, and casually unwrapped it, revealing a faintly quivering lump of flesh inside. Prove your worth. Soren stood with his hands at his sides, looking harmless. Yet the saber and the flesh lump on the table already represented his stance. Choose one of the two, and please, less drama. He was losing his patience. Leora stared at the flesh lump, the fingertips hidden in her wide sleeves trembling imperceptibly. She froze for a moment before saying, A beast core. Where did you get this? Before she finished, she looked again at the blood-stained clothes on him, and the answer was obvious.
A beast core of about 400 years. Is this from the Yellow Heights?
Leora lightly clenched her 5 fingers, concealing her inner astonishment. He had strolled out in the morning with a fried pancake in his mouth, and at night returned with a beast core from a fiend of the apprentice realm. Since when were constables of Cypress Cloud County this fierce?
She glanced at the young man and said succinctly, Generally, a beast core of this quality can be directly used as the main ingredient for a chi-gathering pill, or as an auxiliary material for refining a higher-grade essence condensing pill. If conditions don't allow that, swallowing and refining it directly can still yield 70 to 80% of its efficacy. However, the impurities are many, and it can harm cultivation a little. It is best to take your time. Of course, no matter how it is used, it is not something a martial artist below the apprentice realm can consume. I am telling the truth.
Leora's words carried a bit more seriousness. Upon hearing this, Soren nodded and casually covered the beast core back up. It was more or less what he had guessed. If she had continued to spout nonsense, denouncing it as some kind of poison, then Soren would truly have had to consider drawing his blade. However, the fact that Leora could identify at a glance whose beast core it was truly surprised him. Could it be that she had knowledge of all the fiends around the entire Cypress Cloud County? You can stay, but I will not get involved in your affairs with the Fox Demon. Nor will I inquire about your identity. Soren put things away and continued. As a condition, I want 2 genuine introductory cultivation manuals. Peach Blossom Mountain, Cleaving Axe of the Unparalleled, Fiend Slaying Sword. Leora began counting on her fingers. But the moment she felt the icy glare from the young man, she pouted and retracted her fingers. I don't have those techniques now. I can only give them to you after I am rescued. Fine. Soren didn't press further. He wasn't accustomed to putting all his eggs in one basket. The Demon Suppression Division was good. But if he could forge ties with some martial sects in the Jianghu, and thus gain more information about martial cultivation, that would naturally be an even better choice. Cypress Cloud County suddenly slaughtered the Yellow Hides. Aren't you afraid the other fiends will be enraged? Leora picked up a roasted flatbread and stuffed it full of salted meat until it was bulging, then took a big bite with a satisfied. She mumbled around her chewing, all the fiends fight among themselves. Their attitude toward the Imperial Court is unified. If you ask me, they shouldn't have targeted the Yellow Hides. First, it was just stirring the grass and alerting the snake. What do you mean? Soren's interest was piqued.
That canine fiend had just barely entered the initial realm, while Morgus has been holed up in East Mountain for years, preparing to break through to the perfection of the initial realm. He'd be the most wary of such things.
Leora's small face turned red as she struggled to swallow the flatbread. She let out a long sigh. There is also the Azure Matriarch. Rumor has it that 100 years ago, she was already a great fiend at the Jade Liquid Realm. If I were you, I would report to the Imperial Court and request several deputy generals from the Demon Suppression Division to eliminate the Snake Fiend. First. Then Morgoth and those yellow curs would naturally scatter and flee.
Soren listened quietly, but noticed she didn't continue. What about the Fox Demon? The girl rolled her eyes. Having devoured all the food, she lightly patted her ample chest and let out a burp. Burp. I am tired. I am tired. Soren sat back down on the edge of the bed and cupped his hands in salute. Thank you for the warning. Leora leisurely walked toward the backyard, giving him a sideways glance. You do have a conscience after all. Arriving in the quiet little courtyard, the ease in the woman's eyes faded, and her expression grew complicated. Although she had spoken dismissively of the Yellow Hides, that had been a genuine initial realm fiend. The other party was just an ordinary bailiff, with no master lineage to speak of, and even had to seek cultivation techniques from a stranger like herself, even if he had some fortuitous encounter. It was incomplete. Under such circumstances, he had actually managed to slay the dog fiend. If one could pave a proper cultivation path for him, his future achievements would surely be extraordinary. With such talent, if he were to die in the muddy waters of Cypress Cloud County, that would truly be a waste of heavenly gifts. Unfortunately, she could barely protect herself now, and truly had no strength to meddle in such trivial matters. So hungry, alone in the room, Soren lay on the bed and summoned the panel. When it came to martial cultivation, he was still a complete rookie. He had also heard a lot from the woman. Things like chi-gathering pills, liquid condensation pills, and the Jade Liquid Realm. His thoughts couldn't help but begin to wander. A moment later, Soren took out that meatball, wanting to test his idea. This thing was slightly smaller than a chicken egg. He closed his eyes, put it in his mouth, and a fishy, bitter taste spread from the tip of his tongue. But the heaven and earth energy contained within it attracted him, like honey. Immediately after, Soren began pouring his lifespan into the wind, thunder demon subduing true art.
Remaining fiend lifespan essence, 672 years. In the first year, you spent 7 months removing the dross from the beast core's essence, taking only its purest part, while never forgetting to absorb heaven and earth energy. Your cultivation progressed rapidly. You successfully filled the 6th orifice, achieving minor completion of the wind. Thunder demon subduing true art. But the beast core's essence continued to pour in unceasingly. And you filled the 7th major orifice. From the beast core, you comprehended blood fiend incomplete. Remaining fiend lifespan essence, 671 years.
The lifespan infusion had just begun. Yet surprise and shock already surged in Soren's eyes. His idea was indeed correct. As long as the precious medicine was inside his body, it could influence the process of martial art refinement. But what he hadn't expected was how terrifying the effect would be. How long had it taken to fill 2 orifices before? A full 20 years. A single beast core swallowed was equivalent to 20 years of bitter cultivation. It also solved a puzzle in Soren's mind. That is, mortals lived at most 100 years. Even if they perfected their mortal shell and stepped into the initial realm, they would only gain an extra 40 years of life. But fiends easily lived hundreds of years. Even Yellow Hides, whose realm was lower than his own, had a lifespan of over 570 years. In this seesaw of attrition, fiends could simply outlast the mortal realm's masters, weighting them to death. From this, it seemed the essence of martial cultivation was plunder. If one foolishly spent every day taking from the heavens and earth, by the time their hair turned white, they'd probably still be in the early stage of the initial realm. What is this blood fiend? Soren looked at the panel. Beneath his current martial art, an extra line of text had clearly appeared.
Blood fiend incomplete. By devouring fiend beast cores, you are corrupted by their filth. Through comprehension, you make it your own power, causing the heaven and earth energy in your body to carry a corrosive effect.
After reading the description, Soren suddenly thought of that demon art used by the Yellow Hide. Indeed, if his realm hadn't been far superior to the opponent's, once his internal energy was exhausted, he likely would have ended up like that pile of bones, turning to pus. This barely made up for his lack of offensive methods. Soren calmed his mind and continued infusing fiend lifespan essence.
In the 27th year, you filled the 8th major orifice, because the energy in your body was too abundant, and had absorbed your own aura. It conflicted with the pure heaven and earth energy, slowing your cultivation progress. In the 49th year, all 9 orifices were filled, and the wind thunder demon subduing true art reached major completion.
Perhaps because he was now flush with resources, Soren didn't feel any heartache and prepared to fill it up all at once.
In the 72nd year, you finally filled the 10th orifice, and in your eyes, this world gradually became clearer. In the 104th year, like water overflowing when full, your body was saturated and could not accommodate even the slightest excess energy. All 12 orifices were filled, and the wind thunder, demon subduing true art, reached perfection. Remaining fiend lifespan essence, 568 years.
If cultivating techniques was a guaranteed baseline, no matter what, he could reach perfection. Then deriving a new technique was really no different from a lottery. Soren hesitated for a moment, set aside 300 years for other uses, and poured all the remainder into it. Immediately after, a series of identical notifications left him staring in a daze.
In the first year, even though your realm was complete, you believed that if you didn't advance, you would retreat. So you still practiced diligently every day, ceaselessly taking from heaven and earth. In the 10th year, you continued to take. In the 20th year, you were still taking.
Lines of notifications rapidly jumped up, only to be pushed aside by the next. It repeated like this. He didn't know how many times. Soren's palms grew slightly sweaty, and just as he couldn't help wanting to stop, a line of text that was clearly different from before finally flashed across his vision.
In the 130th year, perhaps heaven rewards the diligent. Within your first major orifice, a strand of energy suddenly condensed and fell like a drop of jade dew. In the 150th year, a second drop of jade dew appeared. In the 268th year, nearly half the energy in your first major orifice had turned into jade dew. Remaining fiend Lifespan essence. 300 years.
Soren's expression grew complex, and he barely understood what had happened. Condensing chi into liquid, combined with what Leora had said about the Jade Liquid realm. It wasn't hard to guess that this was the transformation of the next realm. Perhaps when all the energy in the 12 major orifices turned into Jade Liquid, he would officially step into the next realm. The problem was, he hadn't found a proper method. In the simulation, he had endlessly used the most foolish method, simply piling on time. How much Fiend lifespan essence would it take to fill a single major orifice? It couldn't even be called getting half the result with twice the effort. It was sheer waste and extravagance. Soren closed his eyes and sensed the changes in his body. He found that the Jade Liquid, apart from being thicker and more potent than ordinary energy, seemed to have no further effect. He sighed and turned his attention to the remaining martial arts. The 300 years left were prepared for them. Saber art, fist art, and lightness skill. Soren recalled his earlier battle with the Yellow Hides. What he lacked most right now was offensive means. He selected the demon subduing saber art.
In the first year, even though this saber art seemed far too rudimentary for your current realm, you still picked it up again. Just like when you first entered the martial path and began practicing with strict discipline.
Perhaps because you had lost so much before, and extremes turn around. Soon Soren's brow relaxed.
In the 46th year, you swung your final saber strike, feeling completely at ease. The crude moves mixed together in your mind, gradually becoming something brand new. In the 50th year, you had comprehended a complete saber art, but somehow felt it was insufficient. You looked at the wisps of mist coiling around your fingertip and fell into deep thought. In the 55th year, you comprehended initial realm, Blood Fiend Saber Art, remaining Fiend lifespan essence, 245 years. Initial realm, Blood Fiend Saber Art entry.
Under the infusion of countless years of lifespan, the Saber Art's realm began to skyrocket, from entry to perfection. By the time the rooster crowed at Cypress Cloud County Hall, the duty room was unexpectedly filled with constables. Jace stood in the middle, with 13 dog demon heads beside him. In the main seat sat an old man with white hair and beard, wearing a cyan round-collared robe. His eyes were closed, and his gaunt, bony hands tightly gripped the armrests, with blue veins bulging menacingly on the backs of his hands.
Zephyr softly explained, Magistrate Vile, slaying demons is also part of our duties.
At these words, the old man slowly opened his eyes, his gaze sweeping over the fiend heads on the ground, before quickly looking away, as if he dared not stare another moment. He waved his hand and said,
I don't have this ability. It is your ability. It is Lord Soren's ability. Since that is the case, then let him take charge of the fiend matters as well.
As he spoke, Magistrate Vile abruptly stood up and, in a furious rage, kicked over the table in front of him. Let him manage everything alone. So that is how it is. Soren savored the blood fiend saber art that had appeared in his mind, every move of it brimming with ferocious, brutal chi. It was clearly tainted with much of the viciousness belonging to fiends, utterly unrecognizable as having been born from that by the book, demon subduing saber art.
Fight violence with violence.
This was a complete martial art truly belonging to the initial realm, leagues beyond the fierce Sunday saber, which was merely a shortcut to forcibly break through realms. Combined with his cultivation at the initial realm's perfection, should he face the Yellow Hides again, Soren was confident he could take them down within 3 saber strokes. He looked at his panel. His demon lifespan essence was now only 130 years left. The excess had been used on the other 2 martial arts, but unfortunately with little gain, only bestowing a talent akin to some fist and palm proficiency.
Light as a swallow, years of light body skill, accumulation have given you ever greater mastery over your body. Your movements have become more nimble.
It could only be described as better than nothing. Soren felt no disappointment. He now more or less understood the function of this panel, to refine and evolve new martial arts. The accumulation of materials is even more important than time. Relying solely on lifespan would only leave one pinning hope, on vague, elusive inspiration. Only by learning more martial arts, oneself, can one achieve thorough understanding and draw inferences during refinement, thereby creating something new. This is not something that can be accomplished by just sitting there daydreaming. One's mind an empty void. For example, the Blood Fiend saber art was formed by combining the Blood Fiend power within beast essence. Similarly, the Storm Thunder Scroll only managed to evolve the path to the initial realm because the fierce Sunday saber existed. One must know contentment. The improvement he had achieved in one night, for an ordinary person without the aid of precious elixirs or fortuitous encounters, might very well have taken an entire lifetime. This was already a tremendous stroke of providence. Soren rose and looked at the cabinet, where the clothes Lyra had washed and dried for him were folded. He reached out to take them, removed his inner garment, revealing a near-perfect muscular physique. The only flaw was that due to his laziness, he had not even bothered to walk his patrol route personally, leaving his skin a cold, pallid white, not very healthy. That was no big deal. A bit more time in the sun would fix it. Soren quickly changed his clothes, turned around, and caught sight of a woman standing with bated breath at the back door. Something up.
Just wandering around.
Lyra withdrew her lingering gaze, rubbing her stomach expectantly. Are we having breakfast today?
Wait for me.
Soren turned and walked out, bought 2 flatbreads from a stall, and recalled the 2 martial art manuals he still hadn't received. He hesitated briefly, then asked, how much? To add an egg. By all reasoning, he was a constable chief at the very least, without any bad habits, so he really shouldn't be short on silver. His predecessor's means of squeezing money were actually quite numerous. If he were ruthless enough.
Master Soren, what sum could 2 flatbreads possibly cost? If you enjoy them, come by more often.
The vendor nodded and bowed obsequiously, wrapping the flatbreads and handing them over. Thank you for your kindness, but it is quite unnecessary. Soren shook his head, fished out 10 copper coins, and placed them on the table. He brought the breakfast back home. Munching on a flatbread, Soren headed toward the Magistracy. Halfway there, he noticed something was off. All along the road, whether bun sellers or vegetable peddlers, passers-by cast curious glances his way. Yet when he looked back at them, they hastily ducked their heads, pretending to be engrossed in their tasks.
From now on in our Cypress Cloud County, any matter concerning fiends or evil spirits will all have to go through him.
Him. Master Soren?
Talking nonsense so early in the morning. If you are worried your women are too innocent and your pockets too heavy with unspent silver, he can certainly help you with that fiends, huh?
Keep your voice down. Do you know what happened yesterday? There are no fiends left west of the city. 2 mud-legged villagers from that village said so themselves. Fiends all over the mountains were all beheaded and sent to our county led by Lord Soren.
Now a martial master of the initial stage, Soren caught every buzzing whisper around him, like mosquitoes. He quickened his pace and stepped into the Magistracy's guardhouse. The interior was no different from usual, except it felt a bit emptier. The larger courtyard contained only 4 people. Jace expressionlessly swept the floor with a broom, while the Ox brothers and Tigris squatted by the doorway, staring blankly at each other. Seeing Soren enter, Tigris let out a yelp and jumped up from the ground, shouting at the top of his lungs.
Lord Soren, you've finally come. You have to stand up for me.
He rushed over, looking utterly aggrieved.
Why won't they let us patrol the streets, making us deal with fiends instead? The 3 streets in the west were primed with profit, all built up by our brother's hard work, and Chief Thorn wiped it all out with a single word. Lord Soren, you are Magistrate Vale's favorite. So arrogant. He is not just slapping our faces, he is clearly...
Jace silently bumped him aside. He came beside Soren and said quietly, "This is Magistrate Vale's doing." The 4 people left in the guardhouse happened to be exactly the ones who had gone to the Vance family murder scene the day before. Magistrate Vale's intention was clear. He not only wanted to marginalize these people, but also wished them dead, so that others would see the consequences of following Soren. You are so good at killing fiends. Then let them all be yours to kill. Put up notices. Make it public. First raise you to the highest point, then watch coldly as you fall. If you don't dare, then behave yourself and stop stirring up trouble.
He knew you killed the Yellow Hides. He came in the dead of night, threw a fit, and left before dawn, afraid of running into you.
Jace gave a bitter smile. Clearly, the strength Soren had suddenly displayed had deeply intimidated Magistrate Vel. One might even say it terrified him. But that was still not enough. Even the expert, the county magistrate, invited back from Azure Province, who also had the strength to fight the Yellow Hides, only received a monthly salary of 600 taels of silver. 600 taels of fine silver could crush an ordinary person, but tossed into the muddy waters of Cypress Cloud County, it wouldn't even make a splash. Aside from the dog fiends, there were even more terrifying eating fiends outside the county. If trouble broke out, even deploying the Demon Suppression Division would require first taking over the entire county seat, relocating the populace, then proceeding methodically. Solving the fiend problem in 3 to 5 years would be considered good luck. Don't think it is just a few years. For the county magistrate and other officials, it is equivalent to wasting 10 years of bitter study, their future prospects dimmed, making further advancement nearly impossible. Even if the Imperial Court eradicated the fiends and reinstated him to this post later, he'd only be left with a depopulated, impoverished county that was absolutely unacceptable. If obstructing fiend extermination weren't a crime punishable by execution of one's entire 9 clans, and if Soren didn't possess transcendent martial skills, perhaps the higher-ups wouldn't even bother with this dirty scheme, and would instead strip him of his uniform, or send someone to take his head.
Lord Soren.
Jace's expression was complicated. He still had a younger sister at home to care for, yet the higher-ups had suddenly branded him as Soren's accomplice, making his mood inevitably heavy. If he was already like this, the other party was the primary target. Thinking of this, a trace of sympathy appeared in his eyes.
Magistrate, Vale left me a message before he left. He said, if you come to your senses, bring a jug of wine and visit him. He said, the county magistrate can give others 600 taels. Could he possibly shortchange you?
Got it? Go on with your work. Having heard the man out, Soren simply gave a slight nod. From the moment of the Willowleaf Street incident yesterday, when he realized he was being kept in the dark, he had anticipated this scene. Magistrate Vile had handled things in a very orderly manner. Truly an old hand who had been in the game for many years. If he shut his doors and refused to go out, Soren would become the laughingstock of the whole county after meals, forced to swallow his pride and accept their terms. If he threw the courtyard gates wide open, that would be pure foolishness. In this world, who would willingly antagonize fiends for no reason? As the saying goes, the bird that sticks its head out gets shot. Without silver to be earned, why risk your life? The one thing Magistrate Vale had overlooked was that Soren truly could gain benefits from killing fiends. Not just any benefit, but far more valuable than gold and silver real. Tangible lifespan. So there was no ripple in Soren's heart. If any thought crossed his mind, it was only a trace of delight. You. Jace felt that the man hadn't listened to a word he had said. This was a matter of life and death. After a moment, he helplessly let his hand fall, resting it on the scabbard at his waist. What had become of this world? Just days ago, he was condemning the man's outrageous behavior. In a matter of days, he himself had become a lobbyist, recalling the silhouette of Soren standing alone before the village. This was not a man who merely paid lip service. Jace smiled wryly, his hand on his saber tightening. Damn, he needed to hurry up and save that dowry.
How much dowry does your family need for a bride? What? Soren turned back, puzzled.
Nothing, just asking. Jace drew a deep breath.
He quickly shook off the inexplicable thought. One thing was one thing. The man barely counted as a decent chief guard. But with that debauched private life tease, he couldn't push his sister into a pit of fire. Luckily, the other hadn't heard clearly. Actually, I prefer more mature ones. Soren shook his head, briefly reminiscing about Lady Solara's generous bosom. While Jace was still dumbfounded, he leisurely strolled into the constable's office.
Wait, is this settled just like that? Tigress was so anxious he jumped to his feet, roaring at the 2 big men squatting by the door. Are you 2 mute?
Say something! The Ox brothers had long been dissatisfied with Soren. Now, however, they were as silent as sealed gourds. My wife didn't even let me into the house yesterday. Tor scratched the back of his head with a foolish grin. The moment news got out that he had joined up with Soren, his own home nearly caught fire, as if he had really ravished some family's daughter, as if he had truly taken some family's daughter by force.
This morning, while I was still asleep, she suddenly,
As he spoke, Tor suddenly broke into a foolish grin and rubbed his crotch vigorously. Tigris. Jace. Soren glanced over helplessly and said flatly, "Open the courtyard gate." Under normal circumstances, common folk would never set foot in the Magistracy lightly, let alone the constable's office under the notorious Lord Soren. But Soren was in no hurry. He had seen the desperate look of the Linden father and daughter. When it came to fiends, they would never let go of any life-saving straw. This world had left them no other choice. With the courtyard gate open and the notice posted, this compound became Cypress Cloud County's sole fiend subduing magistracy. He arranged for Jace and Tigris to go out gathering intelligence, swapping shifts with the Ox brothers every 3 shichen. As for Soren, he closed his eyes to feign sleep, conserving his strength. Somewhat unexpectedly, after only half a day, someone came knocking at the door. The visitor was a skinny middle-aged man, his skin dark and swarthy, clearly a manual laborer. He cautiously poked his head inside. The Ox brothers in the courtyard instantly changed expression, standing up straight. Even Tor, who had been grinning foolishly moments before, now had a hint of anxiety in his eyes. Killing fiends. Killing fiends. It was nothing but 2 words rolling off the tongue. The problem was, after all these years serving in Cypress Cloud County, they had never actually done it.
Lord Soren, I have word of evil spirits.
The skinny middle-aged man nervously swallowed, his eyes darting. Led by the Ox brothers, he cautiously stepped into the room.
What kind of fiend? Speak quickly!
Tarin stared over nervously.
No, not a fiend. It is evil spirits.
The thin, middle-aged man quickly waved his hands. Hearing this, Soren slowly sat up straight. He had been here for several days now, and even accounting for his predecessor's memories, this was the first time he caught wind of evil spirits. No need to rush. Take your time. Under Soren's calm gaze, the middle-aged man felt much more at ease. Yesterday, hearing that oil seller ramble on, he had thought the man was drunk. How could Lord Soren possibly be so gentle with him? But seeing it today, he almost believed it himself.
I didn't run into that evil spirit. It was my old lady who ran into it.
He struggled to organize his words.
It started about a month ago. Every day at dusk, while I was showering in the yard, my old lady would light a candle in the room and comb her hair in front of the mirror. She would comb her hair and laugh at the same time, as if she'd been possessed. She would comb her hair and laugh, as if possessed. But that was nothing.
The middle-aged man's expression grew increasingly grim.
One night, I woke up needing to piss. I reached out and grabbed nothing but air. I went looking for her, and guess what? She was standing at the door in a floral dress, her hair soaking wet, sweat all over her neck. I plucked up my courage and tapped her shoulder. When she saw it was me, she let out a scream like she'd seen a ghost. She said she had no idea how she got up. She had no memory of it at all. And ever since that day, my energy's been off. No matter how early I go to bed, I sleep like a log till morning. It has got to be evil spirits possessing her and draining my yang energy, Lord Soren. My old lady boiled me some medicinal soup, but drinking it only made me sleepier.
Listening to the man's vivid tale, Soren's expression gradually turned odd.
And she won't share the bed with me anymore either. She just giggles to herself all day. The more I look at her, the creepier it gets. The most terrifying thing happened yesterday. Business was slow, so I closed up early. When I got home, I heard her voice raw and torn, screaming, "Spare me!" over and over. Have you ever heard a pig being slaughtered? It was exactly like that.
Seeing that the middle-aged man was about to launch into an imitation, Soren frowned slightly, glanced at the Ox brothers, and said helplessly, "You two take the night shift and deal with this evil spirit for him."
At your command.
The Ox brothers gave the middle-aged man a sympathetic look and led him out. Soren leaned back into his rattan chair, gently pressing his temples. It seemed that picking up easy prey in the city wasn't so simple. In the past, when fiends entered Cypress Cloud County, his predecessor would handle them. Now that he had slain that pack of dog demons, word must have spread among the fiends, making it difficult to lure any more. Just then, a figure burst in. Jace stood catching his breath, his face grave. Even though he deliberately lowered his voice, the shock in it was unmistakable.
Lord Soren, Jaren is dead.
Hearing this, Soren lifted his eyes. If he recalled correctly, that name had been mentioned once before. Open Palm, Jaren, the guardian hired by the Forest family from Azure Province. The very Forest family that Leora belonged to. At the mention of that name, the Ox brothers, who had just stepped out the door, froze in their tracks. Then the two ducked their heads, pretended not to hear, and hurriedly carried the gaunt middle-aged man out of the courtyard. As for what kind of person Jaren was, these town guards had long known by reputation. He came from Azure Province, a martial master with a proper sect lineage, and the most renowned among the many guards the Forest family had hired at great expense to protect their estate. His iron palms could shatter metal and stone with no more effort than cutting through bean curd. Rumor had it that the fiends who had perished beneath those palms numbered no fewer than 30, if not 50.
Should we go and take a look?
Jace turned his head to look at the departing backs of the two brothers, not deeming them cowardly, but rather completely understanding their reaction. Cypress Cloud County was hardly a large city, lacking even a proper martial sect. To the locals, Jaren was a mighty dragon crossing a great river, and even these town guards had relied on his name to deter the fiends. If even he was dead, then the culprit was almost certainly a great fiend. According to Magistrate Vial's allocation, any fiends now fell under Soren's jurisdiction. To handle it or not, that was the question. Logically, with no one having formally reported it, they could feign ignorance and muddle through without issue. Yet, with facts that even street vendors could guess, a deliberate act of turning a deaf ear would only make Soren lose all face on his very first day, and might even land him with the charge of failing to keep the fiends in check.
His death is just too coincidental.
Jace withdrew his gaze with a slight headache, wondering why he was like a jinx, always bringing trouble every time he brought news. Let's go. We'll take a look. Soren gently rubbed the tip of his brow, concealing a flicker of irritation that passed through his eyes, then rose, grabbed his saber, and headed outside. It was not, as others might think, a matter of losing face. Compared to the others, he knew exactly what sort of creature was hidden inside Forest Manor. That fox demon from the Fox clan had been personally sent inside by his predecessor. It could be said that for every bloody crime it committed, an additional charge was tallied against Soren. If it were to be inadvertently captured, he himself would likely have to accompany it straight to the Demon Suppression prison. Soren led Jace out onto the main street. The strange looks cast from the roadside were still the same as in the morning, only as the buildings along the street gradually shifted from thatched walls to gray bricks, and black tiles did such stairs gradually fade away. In the relatively affluent eastern part of the city, the intimidation effect of the town guard uniform also rapidly diminished. Soon, a grand and luxurious mansion came into view, its vermilion gate adorned with brass handles, its pair of stone lions standing half a head taller than those at the Magistracy. At that moment, the gate was open just a crack, and Ogden, the portly steward of the Forest family, dressed in a silk robe and small cap, stood before the door with a deeply worried face, waving his hands to shoo away the crowd. Off with you. Off, is this a place for you to gawk at the excitement?
Someone in the crowd spoke up. What do you mean gawk? If there's a demon, old man, you'd best let us know so we can go to the Magistracy for help.
The idle onlookers reluctantly backed away.
What demon? There is no demon. Ogden grimaced, hanging his head despairingly. I've already said it 800 times. There is nothing of the sort.
Another voice in the crowd shouted,
You coward! What are you afraid of? Didn't you see the notices on the street? Lord Soren can slay the dog demons of West Suburb. Can't he slay whatever evil spirit is in your house?
There were also a few people of some status in the crowd who gave the steward no face and began shouting directly.
Lord Soren, my foot. What do you know? Ogden shot them a contemptuous glance, his heart heavy, too lazy to engage further.
As for that Soren, he knew far more about him than this crowd did. Back when that man had rescued the young lady from outside the city, the master had been grateful and treated him with utmost courtesy. Who would have thought the fellow was a gambler who came knocking every few days to borrow silver, which vanished like meat buns thrown to a dog? How could such a man be a good person? It was only in these recent days that things had quieted down a bit. How could the master trust such a man? After discovering what happened to Jaren, he went overnight to the county magistrate's mansion to invite that Thistle, though his frame was extraordinarily thin, as if a puff of wind could blow him over. When he was in Azure province, he had constantly been at the side of the magistrate's esteemed teacher and was deeply trusted. When Jaren was alive, he had addressed him as senior, with every sentence, not daring to show the slightest disrespect. Such a man came to the Forest family to investigate, and in the end, concluded that no fiends were at work, telling Lord Sylvan he had nothing to worry about. As for Jaren's death, the man remained completely tight-lipped. In short, his only word was, no fiends. With Thistle's standing, once he spoke, the matter was settled. Not to mention that Soren had no real ability, even if the stories of him slaying demons were true. What difference would it make? Ogden withdrew from his reverie, and suddenly noticed the noisy crowd parting to form a path. He is here. He is really here. The notice was true. The saber-wearing young man slowly approached, followed by a constable.
Oh, Head Constable Soren, my young mistress is not at the manor. Ogden forced a stiff smile, inwardly surprised. Could it be that the other party had not heard of Jaren's reputation, daring to meddle in this kind of affair?
Hearing this, Soren frowned slightly. Not here.
She has gone out of the city for a spring outing, and won't return for a few more days. Ogden shook his head, then continued. If you're looking for Miss Lyra, please go back.
I am not here for her. Please take me to see the corpse. Soren stepped onto the stone steps. The Fox Demon was not here, yet a martial master had died. This was indeed strange. Hearing this, the Forest family steward hesitated. If the other party was here merely to scrounge for benefits, he would have turned and left upon hearing the young miss was not home. If he was truly here to investigate fiends, Thistle was still inside the manor.
With this in mind, he deliberately raised his voice. Head Constable Soren, the one from the county magistrate's office, has already come to take a look.
Hearing this, Jace was initially startled, then relieved. Since an expert had taken action, the matter would naturally be resolved with ease, and there was no need for his group of constables to worry. The onlookers gathered at a distance also suddenly understood. No wonder the Forest family was so composed. TSK. What a pity they would not see Head Constable Soren. Take action today. Having said that, Ogden looked back at the young man, his meaning clear. An out had been provided. No matter what, the responsibility would not fall on you. Turning around and leaving would not affect your reputation in the slightest. Soren lowered his gaze, taking in the steward's poorly disguised anxiety and unease. He said indifferently, there is no harm in taking one more look. Hearing this, the Forest family steward was finally astonished. He had to admit, it was as if the man had been swapped for someone else. In the past, the other party would have been desperate to throw all troubles away and focus wholeheartedly on lining his own pockets. What was wrong with him today?
After hesitating for a moment, he smiled bitterly and moved aside. If you truly wish to look, then follow me.
The steward turned and pushed open the door. Just as he was about to step forward, his expression stiffened considerably. He saw that, accompanied by Lord Sylvan, two strange individuals walked out one after the other. The first was tall and thin, appearing to be around 50 years old. His eyebrows drooped like dragon whiskers, and he wore a long black robe, making him resemble a bamboo pole. The middle-aged man behind him was stout as a small mountain.
His rough cheeks were covered in a beard like steel needles, his expression somber. He wore a greasy white short jacket. His skin was dark, and his bloated belly was as terrifying as a 10-month pregnancy. Thistle wore a calm smile as he was about to bid farewell to Lord Sylvan. But he looked up and saw the few people at the door. Just as the steward's heart lurched and he was about to explain, Thistle's smile faded slightly, and he cupped his hands in a salute. "Is this young friend Soren? I have long heard of your great name. It is a pleasure to finally meet you." Hearing this, Brahm, who had previously been looking down with a gloomy expression, now glanced over casually in this direction. Under Thistle's gaze, Jace suddenly found his mouth dry and his tongue parched. After all, he was a young man with unquenched fervor, who had only joined the Magistracy to make a living. His heart still yearned for the martial world. Now, face to face with a renowned senior of the rivers and lakes, even his hand on the saber hilt trembled with excitement. Amidst the excitement, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. They were both just bailiffs in the Magistracy, yet such a senior still had to politely address Soren as young friend. True fame in the martial world, it seemed, was indeed earned with one's fists. Jace shook his head, recalling the scene of Soren, drenched in blood, sitting lazily in the countryside, with a fresh corpse cooling before him. Then he felt it was only to be expected. "You flatter me, senior." Soren cupped his hands in response and continued forward, having no mind for further mutual flattery.
However, Thistle moved with his companion to block the way. "This is my junior brother from the Adamantine sect, nicknamed Butcher. He has come to find me from Azure Province and plans to seek a post under the county magistrate as well."
Soren gave a nod of acknowledgement, and Butcher nodded back with a slight jut of his jaw. "I am on official business, so I won't disturb you two any further." After the pleasantries, Soren stepped forward once more, but Thistle shifted a little, still blocking his path. Soren looked over calmly. As they say, every man has his own ambitions. He saw nothing wrong with Thistle working for money, if he hadn't transmigrated already wearing this uniform. Cutting off the path to join a martial sect, he would have liked to join a sect, just like Thistle. Learn some martial arts, and be supported by a wealthy and powerful family. But if the other party took the money to do things specifically meant to cause him trouble, well, that was another matter entirely.
"The three of us are all persons deeply devoted to martial arts. Why not find a place to share a drink?"
Chuckling, Thistle reached out and placed a hand on Soren's shoulder.
"I may be much your senior and thick-skinned enough to call myself an elder. You are still young, and your momentum is too forceful. Chatting more with an old man like me can do you no harm."
Even Jace, standing behind, sensed the subtle tension in the atmosphere. Lord Sylvan and Ogden remained silent, their eyes dim. They did not really believe in Soren's ability. Comparatively, they trusted Thistle's judgment even less. But how dare a couple of businessmen voice their doubts in front of such a master? If people from the Magistracy could take another look, it would have been a good thing. Who would have thought he would block even that? Soren, a mere lowly constable. How dared he act out in front of the county magistrate's favorite? Under the eyes of the crowd, after a moment of silence, Soren slowly removed the other's hand from his shoulder, patting it twice lightly. "I appreciate your kindness, senior, but I still have official duties to attend to today. My apologies." His action instantly froze the atmosphere. Solid embarrassment surfaced in Thistle's eyes, and faint anger crept onto his old face. Butcher turned his head aside. Beneath his thick beard, a mocking smile tugged at the corner of his mouth.
"Chief Constable Soren, if my memory serves me right, you've recently been promoted to oversee all fiend disturbances in Cypress Cloud County. As I said, there are no demons here. It is just an ordinary murder. What official business do you have at the Forest family's residence, or do you not trust this old man?"
A chill crept into Thistle's voice. Soren glanced at Ogden and said calmly, "Lead the way." Ah, Ogden, a mere steward, dared not involve himself in such a dispute. The only thing that shocked him was that a former degenerate gambler
could now remain composed before Thistle. Most absurdly, Thistle seemed unable to do anything about him. Had he known this earlier, the master would have been better off going straight to the Magistracy's constabulary instead of the county magistrate's mansion, which was completely useless. The steward's thoughts drifted as he jogged toward the side courtyard. Once the three figures vanished from sight,
Lord Sylvan repeatedly cupped his hands in salute. Seniors, please forgive any offense. Chief Constable Soren was merely preoccupied with his duties. Do not take it to heart.
Thistle's face was dark and overcast. He flicked his sleeve and followed after them.
Butcher followed close behind and asked casually, "Are you close with him, senior brother?"
Never met him before. I merely have a soft spot for talent, thinking we'd both be serving under the county magistrate and could look out for each other. I never expected a brainless fool. So that is it. I thought you were afraid he'd find out we'd been scared off by the fiends, making us lose face for nothing.
Hearing the hidden jab in his words, Thistle suddenly whirled around, his face grim. It took a long while for him to calm down.
You've just come from Azure Province and think this is a small place. I don't blame you for your arrogance, but remember, the waters here run much deeper than you think.
Having said this, he continued forward, "You think he'll be any different? Soon enough, he'll be just like us, obediently finding an excuse to come out."
Soon enough, he'll be just like us, obediently finding an excuse to come out.
Butcher shut his mouth non-committally. As the two of them conversed, Soren and Jace followed Ogden to a side room and watched as he slowly lifted the white cloth, revealing the corpse beneath. With a single look, Jace's admiration for Thistle grew even more profound. What extraordinary skill it was to lie so brazenly with a straight face. There on the bed plank lay a sturdy male body. The left arm was now just a stump, the abdomen ripped open with a gaping hole, completely hollowed out on the inside. His face had 2 empty eye sockets, no nose, and the entire right side had been licked clean down to the bone. Not a shred of flesh remaining.
Just yesterday, he was perfectly fine, and now only a single night had passed.
Ogden, the steward of Forest family, closed his eyes and rubbed his face forcefully, trying to drive the chill from his body. He still remembered how Jaren, when he first arrived at Forest family, had been so majestic and imposing, full of heroic spirit, and now he was reduced to such a wretched state. Nobody knows how he died. Jace furrowed his brows. For a dignified martial master, even if he ran into fiends, how could he possibly have died without making a sound?
The person who found him was not from our Forest family.
Ogden sighed, wanting to speak but hesitating, and glanced back at Soren. Back when you brought Miss Lyra home after her injuries healed, her temperament remained unchanged, but she lost many memories and could no longer recall many of her relatives. At this point, the steward curled his lip. "Half a month ago," she said, "a friend she met outside was coming to visit, and it turned out to be a young man. This matter shouldn't have been mentioned. The young lady is still a maiden. You two. Please let it pass after hearing this, and absolutely do not spread it outside, lest it ruin her reputation." Jace nodded. Ogden continued. "The master was doting on the young lady and thought that having a familiar companion might help her regain her memory. So he kept this person here. The young lady became very close to him, and we treated him as an honored guest as well. Jaren's corpse was discovered in his room. The young lady just happened to be away from home these past few days. Senior Thistle exchanged words with him and said it had nothing to do with him."
Hearing this, Soren finally understood the other party's intent. The Forest family had long had a suspect in mind, and the reason they sought out Thistle was not to investigate the fiend at all, but to exterminate him. "Where is he?" Jace asked instinctively. "I am right here." A lazy voice drifted in from outside the door. A young man in black robes leaned against the door frame, lazily yawning. His face, with rosy lips and pearly teeth, wore a smile. When he grinned, 2 sharp canines added an extra hint of provocation. He raised an eyebrow and said, So you are Soren? What took you so long? His voice dripped with condescension, staring at Soren as if he were a mere servant in his own household. Hearing this, the Forest family steward's heart suddenly bristled with fear. It was bad enough that the expert invited by the county magistrate knew Soren. But how come the outsider the young miss brought back knew him too, since they were all acquaintances? The hell with exorcising fiends. They might just gang up and eat the Forest family alive. On the other side, Jace's expression darkened slightly. If he had been only 70 or 80% suspicious before, the moment the black-robed youth said this, he could be absolutely certain that the other party was a fiend merely wearing a layer of human skin. There was no other reason that tone. Jace was all too familiar with it. It even stirred up some unpleasant memories. Over the past few years, those fiends who came into the city had almost all spoken to Soren like this. And then it was about finding fresh meat for them, or seizing some family's daughter. At this thought, he instinctively glanced to his side. Soren's face showed no ripple of emotion, as if he didn't feel offended by the black-robed youth's words. He stood with his hands hanging down, quietly observing Jaren's corpse. After a moment, he said, "Everyone, leave first." At these words, the Forest family steward was itching to slap himself. Why the hell did I bring someone back? As if the situation wasn't chaotic enough. It was one thing for those idle gossips outside to believe the rumors. But how could he, who had been the steward of the Forest family for so many years, also let his brain turn to mush? Had he not considered what the Magistracy really was? Was it a magistracy that exorcised fiends? The portly steward wilted and turned to leave, while Jace remained silent. He shot another glance at Soren, confirming that the man had not intentionally lowered his guard against the fiends, so that Jace could seize the chance to strike the black-robed youth hard while passing by. He helplessly cupped his fists and said, "This humble subordinate takes his leave." The two walked out of the side room. Just then, Thistle and his companion also stopped ahead, taking in the steward's irritated expression. And Thistle's expression finally improved, considerably.
"See, what did I tell you? In the end, he is still a young man, too full of himself. He got a little fortuitous encounter and can't see past his own nose. He won't restrain himself until he has lost all faith. Among us, who hasn't had fortuitous encounters, who isn't a genius, who is as ungrateful and unreasonable as him? A fool is a fool. Rotten wood cannot be carved."
Listening to his senior brother's incessant sneering, Butcher listlessly crouched down, picking a blade of green grass and sticking it in his mouth. He reverted to his earlier gloomy demeanor. The mocking words wormed into Jace's ears. He looked over coldly and suddenly felt that this so-called senior of the martial world was completely different from what he had admired, even nauseating. No matter how incompetent Sir Soren might be, he still went alone to 6 Mile Temple Village, slew 13 fiend corpses, and his official salary was only 2 taels of silver and 4 chian. This man has been in Cypress Cloud County for all these days, and hasn't lifted a finger once. At his age, he is still a blabbermouth, and petty-minded. Is he really worth 600 taels of silver a month?
"What are you looking at, little brat?"
As if sensing something, Thistle turned his head, his sinister gaze extremely chilling. He could tolerate Soren because the other was also an early-stage martial master who had comprehended transcendence. But since when did a mere bailiff dare look at him with such eyes? His ink-black long gown moved without wind. A skin and bones hand slipped out of his sleeve, fingers forming an eagle's claw. A surging aura instantly enveloped the other party. Jace's face went pale, and he clenched his jaw. Normally, he understood the importance of forbearance, and would never dare meet the other's gaze directly. He would lower his head, admit his mistake, and let it pass. But at this moment, an inexplicable fury surged within him. The hand resting on his saber hilt suddenly exerted force. The gleaming silver blade unsheathed, catching everyone's eyes.
The Magistracy is handling a case. When is it your turn, a wandering martial artist, to point fingers and criticize? Constable Soren works for the Imperial Court. What the hell are you, to dare to prattle here? Shut your mouth.
At these words, Thistle felt as if struck by lightning, standing stunned on the spot without saying a word for a long time. After a while, he woodenly murmured, "Fine, fine, fine," using the court to suppress this old man. Ogden was so frightened, his legs trembled and unconsciously clamped together. One must understand that the thing these sect disciples dread the most is being suppressed by the Demon Suppression Division. Despite Thistle appearing to have lost his anger, his words already carried a hint of killing intent. This little bailiff would sooner or later be out of uniform. Did he really think Soren could protect him? Only Butcher, crouched on the ground, paused slightly, then spat out the green grass and opened his mouth in a silent, wide grin. At the same time, the gaze he cast sidelong toward the door held a few extra traces of curiosity. Interesting? Very interesting. He hadn't drawn his blade when facing fiends, but when someone merely spoke ill of his superior a couple of times, he couldn't help but draw his blade against an early-stage martial master. What kind of man commanded such prestige in the eyes of his subordinates? Compared to the clamor outside, the side room appeared exceptionally peaceful. The black-robed youth lazily shook his wrists and walked over to Jaren's corpse.
With slight distaste, the black-robed youth tore off the remaining half of the arm and began chewing in large mouthfuls. I thought I'd have to waste more words, but it turns out it is you. That saves me some patience. No need to be polite. I know the rules. From now on, just call me Lord Severin.
Soren calmly watched him eat, his eyes devoid of sorrow or joy. In just a few days, he had witnessed too many similar scenes. The only faint ripple in his heart was because Jaren was a martial practitioner, and the scene before him was the fate of those who could not overcome fiends.
It is not that Severin wants to criticize you, but she told me back then that if I needed anything, I could come to you. I waited so long, yet you never showed up at my door. So I had to take matters into my own hand.
The black-clad young man said impatiently, "From now on, come here every 3 days. Understand, don't complain about it being too often. I won't be staying for more than a few months." The reason Soren had everyone else leave was just for one question. Where is she?
What? Is Lord Seventh's word not good enough? Does she have to tell you herself? Severin devoured the flesh and blood in large gulps, frowning deeply as he stepped toward the other. He raised his head to stare at Soren, wiped the scraps of meat from the corner of his mouth, and said impatiently, "She has been out having fun for too long and went back to Northcliff to visit her mother. She'll be back in a couple of days. If you let my belly go hungry, you won't need her. I'll take care of you myself."
Just then, Severin suddenly noticed that Soren's brows slightly furrowed, as if somewhat disappointed. To be more specific, it was just like when he was young and raided rabbit holes, originally thinking there was a whole litter, but only managing to pull out a single one. The next moment, Soren lowered his gaze and looked over, a hint of coldness gradually rising in those eyes. For some reason, Severin suddenly felt his heart pounding violently, his whole body tense, the instinctive fear that arises when the body senses a crisis. Ever since he had entered the initial stage, he had never experienced this feeling again. Jace's face was numb as he tightly gripped the saber handle. Thistle stood expressionless on the opposite side. The steward of the Forest family was caught in the middle, his face on the verge of tears, wishing he could just turn and run. Suddenly, the sound of an explosion echoed through the courtyard. The thick redwood door burst apart. Instantly, amidst the flying wood chips, a black figure was sent flying backward, spraying a mouthful of crimson, carried by the immense force. It crashed violently, shattering the blue stone floor, and tumbled several times before the force was fully dispelled. Butcher leisurely stood up. Ogden let out an "ayo" and crouched down, covering his head. Thistle trembled slightly and turned his head. Jay stared blankly, holding his long saber. The group of them all looked toward the door. Behind the shattered doorframe, Soren straightened his cuffs, his expression indifferent, and stepped out with an unhurried demeanor. You... Thistle had also spoken with the black-shirted youth.
knowing full well the terrifying background behind him. Even the Azure Matriarch wouldn't dare provoke the Fox clan of Northcliff, let alone a lone martial master from Azure Province. Like himself, bowing his head before them wasn't shameful. The only thing he hadn't expected was that someone actually dared not to bow. Severan's face contorted as the flesh and blood he had swallowed earlier were vomited back up, mixed with saliva. He suppressed the convulsions and flipped himself over, eyes wide with fury. The panting from his throat grew heavy, no longer sounding human, but more like some kind of wild beast. He opened his mouth and let out a roar that boomed like a great bell, deafening to the ears. Those with initial realm cultivation could withstand it, but an officer like Jace, though skilled in martial arts, tried his best to steady himself, yet still stumbled back a couple of steps. As for the steward of the Forest family, he was even more pitiful. He collapsed directly to the ground, and filth stained his silk robe yellow.
It is over. The Forest family is going to have deaths.
With a tearful tone, he stole a glance ahead. He saw that Soren acted as if he hadn't heard, his step steady, unhurriedly drawing his 3-foot-long saber. Compared to Jace's drawing of the blade, he didn't put on a ferocious expression or grit his teeth. Instead, he appeared somewhat casual, as natural as pulling out an oil paper umbrella from his embrace when the autumn rain filled the air. But the moment he saw him draw his saber, Severin instantly ceased his roaring, fear appearing in his eyes, and he turned to flee. Back in the house, the instant the other made a move, he had keenly sensed that profound and dense aura. Absolutely not someone who had just stepped into the initial realm, but at least an expert at the grand completion level of the initial realm. Severin exerted force with both legs, hunched his body, and in one stride shot out 6 jumps. He didn't even have the thought of looking back. Seeing his sorry state, even the 2 senior brothers from the Adamantine sect showed some surprise. They were both at the initial realm. Why should he be this afraid?
The Imperial Court is handling a case. It is not proper for us to interfere.
Thistle seemed to guess that the other party was wary of the helper besides Soren, and suddenly added in a darkly sarcastic tone. Butcher glanced at him and let out a slow, drawn-out sigh. However, even so, what was baffling was that Severin still showed no intention of stopping. Instead, he darted even faster. The next moment, Soren moved with agility, and in 2 or 3 steps silently appeared behind the black-shirted youth. The long saber in his hand suddenly slashed down, its surging fierceness and ferocity finally making Severin's back go cold. Unable to resist, he turned back and used his elbow to block. The long saber descended, wrapped in a crimson and gray-white intertwined. The sharp blade tore through Severin's flesh as if tearing paper. The hard elbow bone cracked audibly, and the rampaging saber chi pierced through his arm, leaving a gash deep enough to see bone on his face. The gash extended all the way to his right shoulder, emitting a sizzling corrosive sound, and at a visible speed, turned the surrounding skin and flesh into pus. As blood plasma sprayed, strands of dark yellow fur emerged from Severin's face, and the stench of a wild beast spread out. On the dark yellow fur, black stripes revealed his true identity. The human skin he had been wearing lost its effect, and he opened a giant bloody maw. It was clearly the hideous head of a tiger. Severin endured the pain, his vision blurred by crimson. He fled wildly to the side, shouting in terror, "You madman! She won't let you get away with this." These words seemed to strike a chord in Thistle's heart. He stared at Soren in shock, his eyes as if looking at a dead man. Butcher watched the tiger fiend charging toward him, clicked his tongue, and reached behind his back to draw an utterly ordinary butchering knife. In his large palm, the pitch-black butchering knife looked more like a toy. After a moment's thought, he turned his hand and used the spine of the blade instead. His thick arm rose and smashed down fiercely on the enemy. Under the fierce force, the already panicked tiger fiend was slammed and sent flying back again. Flustered, it tried to grab onto something, but suddenly, a clean face appeared in its blood-red vision. The other person looked sideways at it, his movements clean and decisive. A silver flash streaked past, head and body separated, dropping to the ground, in sequence and kicking up dust, before swelling many times over into a burly, muscular tiger carcass. Soren sheathed his saber, leaned down, and plunged his long, powerful fingers into the opponent's abdomen. After a brief search, he pulled out a small fiend core.
Slain Tiger Fiend of the early initial realm. Total lifespan 520 years. Remaining 132 years. Absorption complete.
Are you out of your mind?
Thistle glared at his junior brother with fury. How many times have I told you not to cause me trouble?
Butcher sheathed his butcher knife.
Butcher said nothing. He tore off another blade of green grass, placed it between his lips. Then his expression shifted, and he quickly spat it out. Pah! Do you keep dogs around here? It tastes like it has been soaked in piss. Utterly rancid.
Thank you. Soren stowed the fiend core away.
Just my itchy hand at work. I can't help but pat whatever I see. Butcher looked over and smiled nonchalantly. Scoundrel. Scoundrel! The ignored Thistle was trembling with rage.
Soren withdrew his gaze and noticed the saber in Jace's hand. A hint of puzzlement crossing his feature. I was a bit nervous, so I grabbed it to bolster my courage. Jace hid the saber behind his back, forced a stiff smile, and a trace of shame flickered in his eyes. How many more fiends did the man have to slay before proving he was not in league with such creatures? That earlier nameless, haunting flame of suspicion. Deep down, it had even caused Jace to doubt himself. Otherwise, why fear idle gossip? Still, Lord Shin's martial progress was simply too fast. This was the first time Jace had witnessed him slay a great fiend with his own eyes. In Soren's hands, that tiger fiend had never mustered a shred of thought to fight back. The only solace Jace could find was that Soren had not used the demon-slaying saber art. It meant Lord Shen must have been secretly practicing martial arts long before. Most likely under a different master. All right? Bring the fiend's corpses. We return to the Magistracy. Seeing his unwillingness to elaborate, Soren did not press further. As you command. Jace stepped forward briskly. Just then, that sinister voice sounded from the side once more.
Young friend Soren, he hardly needs his courage bolstered. He had the guts to nearly slash me with his saber, and even had the cheek to ask what the hell I am.
Thistle walked over with a cold sneer. Wearing the court's uniform doesn't mean you can swagger around like a big shot in front of a wandering martial master, even without resorting to underhanded tricks. Just your superior alone can silence you. Upon hearing this, Jace's movements faltered slightly, and a pang of regret surfaced. Dealing with fiends was already troublesome enough. Why bring greater trouble over a moment of anger? With that thought, he lowered his head and rubbed his face, wondering how to apologize, when he suddenly heard Soren's calm question. Did you really say that? At those words, Jace stiffened and said helplessly, I did. Thistle's sneer deepened as he stood with his hands hanging by his sides.
Soren nodded, turned, and walked straight toward him. It is no big deal. I am not a petty person. But Constable, Shen, you really ought to discipline your subordinate. Before Thistle could finish, he saw Soren stop right in front of him, palm resting on the scabbard. Soren's calm gaze fell upon him, his thin lips parting slightly as a sardonic note crept into his voice. So what the hell are you?
After Soren finished asking, he still calmly stared at him. So much so that Thistle didn't react for a moment, almost thinking the man really wanted an answer. A moment later, fury surged from within. His gaze turned venomous. His breath quickened. From the day he arrived in Cypress Cloud County, no one had ever dared to provoke him like this. Thistle clenched his 5 fingers tightly, his nails biting into his palms, wishing he could split the man's skull with a full-force palm strike. But for some reason, under the other's calm, unfathomable gaze, he inexplicably felt unsettled. His hand refused to rise. Could it be that he had grown too comfortable in the manor and lost his fighting spirit? No. It was just pointless to argue with a dead man. It was too unwise. Having offended the Northcliffe vixen, there was no way out alive. So why should he bother to do it himself? Thinking this, Thistle forced a cold smile again, though it lacked some conviction.
As expected of a man from the Magistracy, Lord Soren is even more imposing than the county magistrate. It was this old man being tactless.
Hearing this, Soren nodded, turned to leave, but suddenly remembered something and looked back with a hint of concern. At your age, don't keep grinning with a crooked mouth like that. It is easy to get facial paralysis. Thistle subconsciously adjusted the corner of his mouth. Then his eyelids twitched violently, watching the others leisurely receding back. His chest suddenly tightened, and a coppery taste of blood rose in his mouth. Butcher approached his senior brother, gave him a look tinged with pity, then strode away from the Forrest family estate.
To think there was such a ferocious tiger fiend hidden in the house?
Lord Sylvan, who had arrived late, stared wide-eyed as Jace loaded the huge tiger corpse onto the cart and tied it down. He glanced at Thistle, still standing there, offered a fawning smile, then hurried after Soren in a few steps.
Lord Soren, wait!
With his frail body and ornate, cumbersome attire, he could hardly run, so he could only call out repeatedly. Soren stopped, puzzled.
Lord Sylvan bent over, shamefacedly bracing his hands on his knees, and stammered. I came to apologize for what happened earlier.
Lord Sylvan stammered. You saved my daughter, yet I suspected you of colluding with fiends to harm her and make her lose her memory. I also thought you sent her back just to swindle some silver for gambling. Hearing this, Soren's expression stiffened slightly.
It is me, a merchant, who looks down on people because of my own lowly perspective. Lord Sylvan sighed with deep regret. But he didn't notice that Soren had quietly turned his head away.
You are a good man. Lyra was blinded by the fiends. If not for you today, my Forrest family would have been devoured clean by that tiger fiend.
Hearing that name again, Soren fell silent. Among all the troubles left by his predecessor, this one was the most fatal. Either he killed the fox demon to silence it, or he eliminated the real Leora and sank into depravity with a Northcliffe vixen. There was almost no third path. That decisive, clean slash just now, had not only severed the tiger fiend's head, but also cut off his own path of retreat. Soren considered himself an ordinary man, prone to hesitating over gains and losses. It was better to be straightforward, to act on impulse. Why dawdle like a child not yet weaned, unable to let go of anything? There is no need. Receiving the court's salary and performing one's duties is only right. Soren composed himself, watched Jace pull the cart over, and nodded slightly to Lord Sylvan in farewell. Only right. Lord Sylvan echoed with a nod, but a bitter smile tugged at his lips. Only right, indeed. If that were true, then after all the silver he'd offered the county magistrate, why hadn't Thistle taken the money and done the job as only right?
Lord Soren, why not come over for tea when Lyra returns? She once apprenticed under a master and knows a bit of martial arts. You are close in age, so you should have many things to talk about.
Hearing this, Jace subconsciously frowned. Everyone in Cypress Cloud County knew that the Forrest family's only daughter was as beautiful as a celestial maiden, and countless young men coveted her. Compared to her, his own sister might be a modest beauty, but she was far behind in family background and experience. Wait! Why was he comparing his sister to the Forrest family's young miss? Jace patted his forehead. Besides, with Lord Soren's current martial skills, he might not even look twice at a woman who had consorted with fiends. Lord Soren, what do you think? Lord Sylvan looked over cautiously. Soren lowered his gaze to the saber at his waist and said slowly, "Very well," Soren said. "Very well." Receiving an affirmative reply, Lord Sylvan was overjoyed. Although the other's expression was a bit odd, they were both young. The more they interacted, the more likely it might work out. Jace rolled his eyes. As expected. Even if everything else changed, Lord Soren's restless heart remained the same. Just then, the fat steward, having changed into clean clothes, laboriously lugged a large silk bag and heaved it onto the cart. Jace could tell from the sound alone what was inside. Judging by how the cart shook, it had to be at least 800 tiles, equivalent to nearly 30 years of a constable's salary.
Please, don't refuse. If you won't accept, I truly can't get past the guilt in my heart. Besides, even the court tacitly permits this demon-slaying bounty.
Lord Sylvan cupped his hands in salute repeatedly.
Ogden beamed smugly, currying favor. Knowing you enjoy a bit of merriment, copper coins were too inconvenient, and paper notes too unimpressive, so we prepared everything in solid silver.
Soren walked up to the cart, lifted the silk cloth, and stared at the gleaming silver beneath. A flicker of envy, almost imperceptible, crossed his calm eyes. I really ought to find a lamppost and string these people up. 2 egg stuffed pancakes cost a mere 10 wen. With this much silver, you could wrap the vendor's entire family in pancakes. That is what they say indeed. Jace sighed too. That casual sum of silver. He could never save so much for his own sisters. Dowry in a lifetime. Soren rummaged about casually, picked out 2 10-tael ingots, and tossed one to Jace. This will do. We can't take care of the forest family's daughter for free. We ought to at least collect some meal expenses. He shoved the rest off the cart, giving no one a chance to speak further, leaving Lord Sylvan standing there, dumbfounded. Soren strode out of Forest Manor. Jace clutched the silver ingot in astonishment, then hurriedly pulled the cart after him, calling out Lord Soren. Once they reached the street, he finally meant to ask about what had just happened. He truly hadn't expected Soren to fall out with Thistle so readily. Soren said, "Next time, use your brain before you act. Your life isn't something you just picked up off the ground." Soren stretched, sauntered toward the street-side tavern, and eyed the wooden plaques lining the wall. A pot of Hudiao wine, a roast goose leg, the left one, and a steamed fish. Washing his back as he gave the order, Jace rubbed his stomach the way Lord Soren spoke. You'd think the other person's life was something he'd found on the roadside. Even if it were, why would he stick his neck out for strangers? And he even treated them to a meal. Not until Soren walked off with a clay jug and a lotus leaf parcel did Jace's mouth fall slightly open.
Jace asked, puzzled. Aren't we eating here?
Who said we? Soren glanced back, his expression odd. If you want to eat, buy your own. Do you even understand what keeping public and private separate means? 2 tiles and 4 chen a month. You want me to treat you to a meal. More like treat you to a load of crap. Jace pulled out the 10-tael ingot, looked at the silver, then at the man, his heart full of mixed emotions. What a strange fellow.